Kill them before they tell us anything useful!
Remakes are kind of a tricky thing to get right. For the most part, even a small development team with half a working brain can produce a remaster, although 2K's remaster of Mafia 2 does prove that there are exceptions to the rule. But the idea of a remake, building an entirely new game using modern technology and streamlining some of the clunkier gameplay elements to ensure a smooth in-game experience for modern players, takes a little bit more finesse. Can you as a developer stay true to the original game's vision and style, while still managing to modernize it in other ways that enhance the experience rather than detracting from it? That's the thing on my mind when looking at any self-labeled remakes, and by God are there a few of them in 2020, such as in today's case, Destroy All Humans. For those that, like me, may have heard of the game but never actually played it or really know anything about it, Destroy All Humans is a third-person shooter game presented in a linear sandbox style, where each level is sequential and connected by a loose, overarching narrative, but each level allows you to play mostly however you want to, as long as you get the main objectives done, or at least that's how it's presented. The main premise of the story is, well, I don't really know how to describe it, so I'm just going to let the game itself describe it.
Incompetent fool. I should never have sent you.
Let me get this straight. You sent me, him, Crypto136, to a hostile planet, and he's disappeared. There's a time for thought, and there's a time for action, and this is one of those times.
Which?
The second one.
Normally, I prefer to do all the talking, but honestly, I felt it was just better that you guys experienced that for yourself. As you might have noticed watching that short clip, the game doesn't take itself all that seriously. There is a lot, and I do mean a lot, of funny, self-aware humor, and there's definitely a few subtle moments that make you think, wow, did I hear that right? Did they seriously just go there? And for the most part, it works, except for the times it doesn't. To be perfectly honest, I think in hindsight that sentiment could actually be applied in regards to the game itself. It's good up until it isn't. There's some dialogue in here that I could easily see some idiotic quote-unquote gaming website like Polygon complaining about how problematic the dialogue is in 2020, despite the fact that nearly all the audio is pretty much ripped directly from the original game released like 15 years ago. All I'm saying is that if you're among those who are easily offended by political, cultural, and really societal-based satire, this game will not be to your liking, but overall, it's definitely to mine. As I was actually editing this review, my prophetic words just became true. I've already started seeing a few articles emerge from certain gaming websites demanding that the developers remove quote-unquote problematic and offensive language and references in the game, despite the fact that this is an M-rated game that is quite literally a direct remake of a 15-year-old M-rated game. Nothing about this game is supposed to be child-friendly. But setting aside the sensitivity argument, I got to wonder why these journalists got a review key for the game when they so clearly despise adult content in video games. I mean, why even play it if you hate it so much? I mean, maybe they're into self-inflicted punishment, I mean, there is a market for that, but at the same time, I do have to wonder if the world would be better if they themselves got beamed up for some probing. I suspect even the aliens themselves would be confused by them. One of my favorite levels includes this little quest where you masquerade yourself as the mayor and give an important political speech to address the community's concerns about recent alien sightings and other odd events. It's a back-and-forth conversation minigame, kind of like a more dumbed-down version of the backtalk dialogue game mechanic from the Life is Strange prequel Before the Storm. Recent alien sightings? Blame it all on communism and farmers getting a little too friendly with their animals. That's all I'm saying.
If they ain't nothing going on here, how come all my cows is glowing like lightning bugs? What you say to that, whippersnapper?
You want to know what's been going on around here? I'll tell you what's been going on around here. Communism, that's what. So the next time you see a strange light moving and changing direction at incredible speed in the night sky, you just think to yourself, no commie's gonna distract me from my patriotic duty with a couple of bottle rockets. No, sir.
The mayor's right. This was all just a random series of suspiciously coincidental yet easily rationalized events.
Going over to the gameplay, the game's levels are each fairly unique, at least on the surface level. The objectives allow you a fair amount of opportunity to experience many different playstyles, except how you play isn't always up to you, in contrast to what you might have inferred from the game's official promotional trailers and pre-release gameplay clips. Many, although certainly not all of the levels, are primarily stealth-oriented, to the point that breaking out of stealth mode will result in an immediate game over state in some cases. Now, I'm all for quality stealth gameplay. I've got over 32 hours spent in 2016's Hitman video game from IO Interactive, but even Hitman's stealth gameplay was at times a bit more forgiving than Destroy All Humans, and Hitman was literally marketed as a stealth sandbox game. Personally, I'm not opposed to taking the sneaky approach, but what I am opposed to is arbitrary and pointless gameplay inconsistencies and contradictions. When your game is called Destroy All Humans and the quest instantly fails you for being spotted by any single human, a better name would be Fear All Humans, which philosophically and historically I guess could also make sense. If I was an alien, I'd fear humans too. Most of the levels overall are very short, usually containing 1 or 2 objectives and can usually be completed in less than 10 minutes apiece, some being as short as 5 minutes long. You'll usually spend more time getting to where you need to go than you will actually completing the assigned objective. Now, Destroy All Humans being a third-person shooter is kind of interesting because third-person shooters are kind of notorious for being difficult to get right. Back in the 2000s and early 2010s, there was a fair number of developers trying to make third-person shooters, but from a first-person shooter mentality, prioritizing hyper-accuracy as if they were making a Call of Duty game. Destroy All Humans takes a far more casual approach. Not to say that the game is easy, there are definitely some levels that provide challenging enough encounters as far as pure combat goes, but it requires a different set of skills. In order to succeed in most combat situations, the ideal approach is to pick the weapon most appropriate to the situation. Are you dealing with a rather mobile group of enemies, chasing you around in a close-knit group? Time to pull out the lightning gun, which operates very similarly to Winston's Tesla cannon weapon from Overwatch, dealing a constant arc of damage to a handful of targets in the player's immediate area. I have sort of mixed feelings about this specific weapon because on one hand it's a wonderful go-to when my health is low because it has the added benefit of stunning all enemies it's dealing damage to, potentially allowing me time for my health to recover automatically. On the other hand, the time to kill on that weapon is very slow, usually taking a couple seconds to eliminate a single enemy. Sometimes I get impatient and just grab an enemy with telekinesis and hurl them into the sky like an over-enthusiastic and oversized baseball. Then I usually forget about them unless I accidentally hurl them straight upward, and then seconds later am alarmed when their dead body lands right in front of me. Telekinesis is very fun to use on enemies. Aiming with it is nearly impossible, so I usually just haphazardly hurl things vaguely around in the direction I want them to go. Since I'm usually hurling enemies, it hardly matters where they go because being thrown hundreds of feet in the air to only then slam into the side of a building will usually do the trick in any situation, and personally it's way more satisfying than hurling stuff at enemies anyway. Speaking of enemies, there's a fair amount of enemy variety present in the game. While mostly you're going to be dealing with the same 2 enemy factions, the US Army and the secret government organization Majestic, basically the in-game parody knockoff of the Men in Black movies, there are a fair number of enemy types, at least on the Army side. You'll have to deal with assault rifle enemies, missile launcher enemies, tanks, and anti-aircraft guns, as well as semi-giant Titanfall-like robots, among other things. Meanwhile, Majestic has, well, mainly pistol-wielding agents. I'm not gonna lie, you'll definitely have way more fun fighting the Army than you will fighting Majestic. That said, Majestic definitely plays a bigger role in the story and are way more fun to listen to in cutscenes than the Army. The satire and overall game humor isn't really as strongly present in Army characters as it is with Majestic, which is a bit odd because if the past 50 years or so of filmmaking has proven, it's that satiric Army films and TV shows can be absolutely fantastic. In addition to playing each linear level, the game also allows you to explore each of them freely in a separate, more sandbox-oriented mode, where you can find collectibles and, in general, cause as much chaos as you possibly want, until you either get bored or die. One thing I should mention is that, similar to games like Grand Theft Auto, Destroy All Humans does feature an inbuilt natural enemy escalation system, where you'll start out dealing with small clumps of enemies, before eventually you cause enough carnage where reinforcements have to be called in to deal with you. You'll start with armed civilians and then eventually face increasingly large numbers of police officers. Then if you deal with them, the army will show up with trucks full of troops. Engage with these for long enough and the military will call in tanks and anti-aircraft guns. Also around this time, Majestic agents will enter the fray as well. The difference between Destroy All Humans and GTA in this regard, however, is that the game doesn't explicitly tell you on your interface when you force your enemies to step up their game. In Grand Theft Auto, you had the 5-star system, with 1 star being low-level resistance and 5 stars meaning seemingly every single NPC enemy on the map is gunning for you. In Destroy All Humans, you do get some indicators that more enemies are on the way. if you listen to certain enemy voice line callouts, but in the heat of combat you're likely to miss these, so I wouldn't really come to rely on that. One thing that really enhances the combat and gives the game a bit more much needed depth is the rather extensive upgrade system. You have all the usual upgrades, although at least the developers took the time to reword them so they actually sound creative and somewhat desirable, unlike games like Crucible where you had nonsense like +5 weapon damage when crouched and when using the last bullet in an automatic clip of 30 bullets or more. God, Crucible made no sense whatsoever. Normally I abhor violence, but I feel unduly aggressive to whoever writes perk descriptions like that and thinks it sounds good, because it doesn't. But on top of these base upgrades, such as a bigger weapon clip size for the lightning gun and increased player health, most of the other upgrades actually either unlock new abilities or greatly enhance the power of your existing abilities in new and creative ways. Upgrading your character has a directly profound effect on the gameplay and makes the character far more fun to use. You could definitely play through the entire game without upgrading anything, aside from buying like one mandatory upgrade during the tutorial, I think. But why would you? It's like how some of the stealth missions, mainly the mid-game and later game ones, not so much the earlier ones, will allow you to completely ignore the stealth and just be an agent of destruction and devastation, although you might miss out on an achievement or two if you choose to go that route. You could roleplay as Alien Agent 47, but why would you? Where the game allows me to be chaos incarnate, I enjoy doing so. I just wish it gave me more opportunities to do so because the physics engine here in-game is a joy to experiment with. That said, I do wish enemies I hurl at fast speed explode into red goo, like how the mutated cows did so in that one level. Yeah, it's probably a bit grotesque of me to admit, but if you're going to be ridiculous, don't do only the bare minimum. One area I do want to touch on in a bit of detail is the game's optimization quality, or more accurately, its lack thereof. The loading times for some of the levels are beyond terrible. We're talking almost Garry's Mod-like loading times in certain cases. Additionally, even after you load in, the frame rate drops to sometimes as low as 10 to 12 FPS for a couple seconds as the world renders in. And I did my own research on this one. I actually tested this by disabling antivirus and closing nearly every other program I felt might otherwise drain CPU usage, and then seeing whether or not the game's performance improved. If there was any change or improvement, it was nominal at best, if not altogether non-existent. And I'm running this game off a NVIDIA 2070 GTX GPU with an Intel i7 7790K CPU and 16 gigs of RAM. If I can't get this game to load at a reasonable speed, let alone run at a stable 60 FPS, what hope does someone with a mid-range gaming PC have at getting this clunky mess to run properly? Overall, I love this game. I definitely do. It's certainly a niche title, something that doesn't make any effort to cater to the masses, so the reduced $30 price tag seems more than fitting. We need more mid-budget games on the market, and I don't just mean cut the prices of all $60 games and starve developers and publishers of revenue because, God forbid, Activision or EA not earn hundreds of millions if not billions of dollars per game. But while I do love the occasional 30 or 40 hour game, I'm also perfectly happy to jump into something not quite so pretentious, something more short and sweet. There is a market for that. I know I'm a customer that would gladly want more of that. So for those of you publishers, looking to make games like that, there are people like me out there who will definitely support your products if they're good. I do hope that the success of this game results in a new entry in the series being developed, and that the developer goes the route of Resident Evil and begins to release a mixed stream of both remakes of older games as well as new entries in the series. I think there's a lot of potential to be had here. I hope the development teams over at Black Forest Games and Pandemic Studios decide to continue pursuing that potential to the best of their creative ability. Before we end this video for today, I do want to sincerely thank those of you that continue to support the channel, and also those of you that have subscribed within the last month. In July, the channel has seen over 75 new subscribers, over 13,000 new views, and almost 800 hours of watch time, breaking all previous records. My goal is to end the year with over 1,000 subscribers, and thanks to those of you that have stuck with me, that goal grows ever more feasible, something I once didn't even believe possible. If you haven't yet subscribed and clicked the bell to get notified when my next video goes live, I honestly hope this is a video that earns your support. Another way you can show your support and maybe get something in return is by sharing your thoughts on the game or this video in the comments down below. Speaking of which, we have our comment of the week from Shocking Rotom, who I'm assuming I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and if not, we're gonna go with it. In response to my recent Paladins review video, he says, "One big thing is Overwatch players are annoying and say Makoa, the turtle with the hook, copied Roadhog, but guess what? That's actually completely wrong. The hook concept came from a previous high-res game before Paladins that was never officially released, so some might say Overwatch copied the hook from high-res. Overwatch players crap on Paladins and don't even know their facts, but you actually seem to have a brain. Hats off to you." Well, I don't know what previous high-res game you're referring to, but one thing worth mentioning is while it's very possible that Makoa's hook wasn't originally created as an Overwatch clone, that doesn't mean its release after Overwatch was likewise happenstance. One game sees what the other is doing and maybe drags an unused concept out of the closet in order to mimic their competition. Overwatch is probably guilty of doing something similar at some point, but usually their characters are unique enough where the comparison isn't as clear, except for Torbjorn, who even Blizzard admits was a slight ripoff of Engineer from TF2. Overwatch being accused of having one rip-off character and Paladins being accused of having like half a dozen isn't a good look for high-res, comparatively speaking, regardless of how true it actually is. What people perceive to be true often proves far more important than what actually is true, as the video game industry constantly proves, sadly. Thanks for the comment, and hope you stay around. And on that note, that's where I'm going to wrap it up for today. Hope you guys have an awesome day. This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Stay safe, and peace out.
You're being outrun by a vehicle that can't even fly!